Hello, Anu. Thanks for joining. Just to say right now that we have 25 attendees currently, with more coming in at every moment.
Yes, and I'll just wait 1 minute more for Rebecca to join, and then I will start. And if she hasn't joined by then, maybe I can ask Anastasia or Shauna to see if we can get hold of her somehow.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
So while we are waiting, I just wanted to ask you to take a look at the guidelines for happy Zooming. So that you are aware of how we would like to run the webinar. For instance, the raise hand button to sign up to speak. You can use the Q&A to either ask questions or respond to questions. We would like to inform you, of course, that the meeting is recorded. And if you have any concerns or requests regarding this, please contact us to see if we can help.
I believe that Rebecca is here now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Is she in the attendees list?
Yes, she's in the attendees list.
Ah, so then I need to promote her. That's why I was looking at the attendee list in the first place. Yes, I see you.
Okay, so then maybe what I will do is I will start, and so that we get going. And I wanted to welcome all of you to this webinar, which was organized at very short notice. And it's really great to see that we can come together, so many of us, at such a short notice. And to the newcomers, please do take a look at the screen to become aware of our happy Zooming guidelines. And also we have a poll ongoing. So if you would like to take a moment to respond to that, it will help us in our conversations here today. So for those of you who do not know me, I am Olivia Lind Hallorsson. I am the head of the Children at Risk Unit at the Council of the Baltic Sea States, and one of many initiators of the PROMISE project back in 2014. And PROMISE is a European movement to promote child-friendly, effective, multidisciplinary and interagency services for child victims and witnesses of violence. And as many of you know, the PROMISE Barnahus network was launched in November last year, and we recently had our first General Assembly. And I invite all of you who are not aware of the network to look it up. And maybe we can get a website link in the Q&A or chat. And of course, welcome you to join us. And this week, we gathered the partners and the experts to the PROMISE 3 project to kick off our meetings. And during our meetings, we decided to hold this webinar to focus on COVID-19 and the impact it has on Barnahus. And over the past weeks, we have heard from some of you who are here and many others of the particular challenges that you face. But we've also seen great leadership from many different countries, from the EU, from the Council of Europe, from the UN, to highlight some of the vulnerabilities of children during the crisis and to promote action to mitigate negative effects. But today is an opportunity for us to focus on Barnahus and similar services, and to look a little bit at the impact and trends that you see, and what you expect as society slowly start to open up and go back to normal. It's obviously not an opportunity for extensive and in-depth discussions because we simply don't have the time for that today. But it is a way for us to identify the issues that you would like to come back to and provide so that we can provide further opportunities to discuss these in more in depth. And our meeting ends at 1 o'clock today, but we are providing an opportunity for those of you who want to stay around to discuss either in smaller groups or as the bigger group. And after this call, we also plan to circulate a short survey, and that just aims to map some of the issues that we are discussing here today. It's obviously not a scientific research in any way. It just aims to give us an overview of the trends and challenges that you see, and to give us a feeling of where we are, and perhaps also look into the future. And as I mentioned earlier, depending on interest, we may organize further webinars to discuss issues. Before I begin on our first topic, I just wanted to take a short moment to introduce the chairs that we have with us today. We have Linda Jonsson, who is an experienced social worker and researcher, and she is our competence center coordinator for Promise, which means that she coordinates the education that we offer in the context of Promise 3. We have Rebecca O'Donnell, who is a lawyer and co-founder of Child Circle, and she is playing and has played from the very beginning of Promise a really important role as a legal advisor to us. We have Shauna, my colleague at the Council of the Baltic Sea States. She's the Barnahus network coordinator and manager of Promise 3. And we have Anastasia, who will help us to keep everything smooth. And she is the Promise 3 project assistant. And as you can see from the agenda, there were a few topics that we wanted to discuss. And at the end of the meeting, I will invite all of the chairs to give us a few conclusions that we will then circulate together with a link to rewatch the webinar. But let's start. To open our discussion here today, we would like to look at a central question, and that is operations of Barnahus and similar service during the crisis. Potential interruption in services, potential adaptation, opening up services after having been closed, and also operating during the crisis. And we have our poll, and some of the questions speak to this. And I can see now that we have 4 respondents who've answered that they have kept open. And we would love to hear what kind of adaptations you have had to undergo to operate. And 7 of you have responded that you have closed your services for visitors, but you have continued to offer online, mobile, or other ways to continue services to our clients. And I know that the situation has looked very different in different countries. And in some countries, services have kept open. And one of the services that have kept open is Barnahus Linköping in Sweden. And I've invited Anna to just give us a few bullet points or reflections on what it's been like to operate during the crisis, what kind of safeguards have been put in place, and the impact you've seen on your work so far. So I don't know if we can find...
Yep, she's here and she is unmuted. Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Yeah, it's Anna Petersson. Great.
Hi.
Hey, Anna.
Hey, can you see me, because I don't see myself?
This is how it works. I can promote you to being, and then we can see you. It will make you jump out of the meeting very quickly, and then you'll come right back.
Okay, thank you. Do you see me now?
Oh,
Like
well,
that?
yes, we can
That's
see you.
right. That's good.
Finally. Okay. Yes, we have had, we haven't closed our Barnahus, but still we're not really running as usual, of course, because there's a lot of measures taken to minimize social personal contact. And we are grateful that we have been able to prioritize that we can interview children still and giving them some help as usual. And in the beginning, we looked at our routines and we decided together with the prosecutor and the police that we could really conduct these interviews with the children still, and also give them the interventions we usually do. And according to our routines, the extra person the child has to meet now is the police that's going to interview them, and also maybe sometimes the lawyer, the special representative. So in that place, it's not that really many new people for the child, according to the situation. And in the beginning, we noticed some cancellations within the interventions we have, and also, of course, some children that couldn't be interviewed because they weren't in school and so on. They stay home as soon as they have slightly any symptoms. But now we think it's more like usual. We haven't seen an increase or a decrease. And we know for sure that, of course, many children have a poor situation in this COVID-19 situation because they're home more and yeah, you know, all these kind of things. But we haven't noticed the increase, nor has the police or the social services when we have asked them. And I think it's because, I think we're going to notice that further ahead. It's too soon to say that it has increased, that we notice it has increased at our place. And we have had just a few visitors coming to us that we have been thinking that they have had symptoms that actually we might have had stopped them in the door and asked them to leave. But it's not that easy to do that. Sometimes we have noticed it when we're in the meeting and so on. But as I said, it has just been a few times. And most people respect these strict rules we have in Sweden. And we have a sign on the door saying, you know, it's important not to enter here if you have any symptoms and so on. And we have a lot of external things going on, you know, education, networks, and whatever. We have a lot of things. And of course, none of these are happening now. We have to cancel all these kind of things. And the Barnahus team, we have kind of a schedule who is working on place and who is working at home, like I'm at home right now, for example. All things measured, taken to kind of minimize personal contact. Yeah, I think that's kind of sum it up a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. And as other services that have been closed now are planning to open, do you feel that there are something that you would like to recommend to them to look carefully at as they open?
I think it might be all these things, that kind of the measures they have taken to minimize contact, routines that we usually really care about, that we think is important. For example, that we don't attend these listening rooms while the interviews are conducted. We don't do that now. Only one social secretary is allowed in that room to minimize the people in there. We don't invite the parents and the children to information meetings after, and so on. So many of these things that we are really we think that is very important things we can't do now, because we have to prioritize the interview and the care of the child in another way so it can be conducted. And we have to respect that the child is coming to our Barnahus without the parent knowing about it and what that is doing to the family and the parents. So I think it's about what kind of measures can be taken to minimize personal contact.
Thank you so much, Anna. And there are some really important things that we will have to come back to there in terms of children's participation and information, as you say, but also the effects it has on the multidisciplinary response. And we will discuss this a little bit later in the meeting.
Can I just add something, Olivia?
Yeah.
I think it's important to not to kind of lose the contact between the partners. So we have these, when we have these interagency meetings, we have that through the conference telephone, we have the working group once a month. We haven't canceled that. We have that through the Zoom or Skype. As far as possible to have these meetings, partner meetings and multidisciplinary meetings. And it's kind of nice to see how everyone really tries to do this together and help each other. It's touching. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you so much, Anna. I'd like to invite the Barnahus in Ireland, who, as I understand, has been closed but is now planning to slowly open. If there are any particular things that you would like to share that you see as concerns or solutions as you plan for your opening.
Sure. So hi, yeah, it's Aoife O'Malley here. I'm the manager of the Barnahus in the west of Ireland here. I suppose Olivia asked me to pull together 3 main points, and there's so many points to talk about, but to condense it down, I guess we've learned quite a lot from the period that we've been away from each other. We're all, or most of us at least, are working from home. So everything has been online for the last couple of months, and it was very strange because we were in Stockholm the first week in March, and then all of a sudden we came home and never got to leave again. So it's been odd. But I suppose the first thing is that we really realised the importance of being under one roof and that interagency working piece, because all of the feedback from all of the interagency team is that it's difficult to be part of a team, and we're a relatively new team. We're really only together since last November, so we were only, you talk about the forming, storming stages, and we're very much at the forming stage and starting to storm, but we're back in the forming stage now. So I think there's some work going to need to be done just to get us back together again, from a psychological point of view, you know. And I suppose just to note as well is that when people are working from home in this type of work, it's additionally challenging, because I guess we have the advantage when we're in the office of, even if you have a tough day, you turn off the light and you leave it behind you at the end of the day. Whereas when you're at home and you're maybe discussing these difficult cases and so on, that does impact. And then you're leaving maybe your office and your children are there, or so you're having to really compartmentalize and really use your skills around managing your own resilience, I think, as practitioners. And I suppose there's nobody like your colleagues to understand what you're going through if you do have a difficult case or anything like that. So I think we've really had to work hard to support each other as a team when we've been so far apart. I guess just, I suppose, to make the point as well is how important communities are for children. So one of our biggest referrers in relation to child sexual abuse would be teachers. And because the schools are shut at the moment, children don't have access to their teachers. So we have a huge drop in referrals for child sexual abuse, and obviously a huge drop in disclosures as well. What we've noted, I suppose, or what was noted in the media this week, is that the adult services are only down 50%, whereas the children's services are down way more than that. So adults are accessing their supports a little bit more, but calls from children to helplines has increased hugely. So we know children are experiencing adversity and abuses at home, but they're not getting to the people that they need to talk to make disclosures and so on. But I suppose social distancing has possibly protected some other children from accessing perpetrators, so that maybe has been a positive for them. I suppose just to make the final point as well is that necessity is the mother of all invention. So we have been very creative about how we get together. And I remember even like that when we were in Sweden in March, saying to Shauna, it could take years for us to have video conferencing up and running in Tusla because they were so slow to get IT issues over the line, and we have it. They managed to roll it out because they had to, so it's good. And we're seeing ways of working together. I mean, the area that we cover is quite large, and we're potentially driving up to 3 hours to see some of our teams across the region. So, you know, now this is much more the norm, so we'll be able to maybe be creative about how we interact in the future. What else did I want to say? I suppose as a service, we are still providing online consultation, and we are seeing children, we're seeing the more acute cases, I suppose, from a forensic medical point of view, they're still accessing the service. So it's really important that those cases continue to be seen. And really our medical service have been really good at pulling together a protocol around all of this and screening children appropriately and so on. So that has been really, really helpful on their side. And we've had an opportunity to do some paperwork and policies and link in with universities about research and so on. So there are some merits to this experience, I guess. I suppose for the moment, our plan to transition out is going to be around socially distanced meetings. So sitting in the room together, but sitting 2 meters apart from each other is going to be the protocol over the summer. But getting people together again is really going to be a priority because it's hard to work as a team in this way. But I suppose we are expecting a big influx of referrals once the children go back to school in September, so we're going to have to prepare for that. And we're just thinking about ways to manage that. And I suppose one thing that has come out of this whole process in Ireland is that there's a much more public discussion about sexual violence and how it occurs and the context that it occurs in, particularly for children. You know, they're saying about like the rape myths that are out there about, you know, people going out and getting drunk and this kind of thing. But actually what we're finding is that that's not necessarily the case, and that people continue to experience sexual violence even though the pubs and the clubs and the restaurants are all closed, you know. So it's just generated discussion around that in the public. So that's, I suppose, been quite helpful to raise the awareness in relation to the Barnahus in Ireland. I think that's everything.
Thank you so much. That's very rich, and there is so much food for thought there. And maybe before we move on, I just wanted to kind of support you in the fact that there are a few things that are changing in terms of how we work together, and maybe some of that we will be able to bring with us as we continue our operations and improve them. So it's kind of also being able to harness the ideas and the new ways of thinking and working that we have had to generate as we've been in confinement. So I'd like to thank you both for that, and encourage everyone to continue the discussion on this topic in the Q&A. If you have questions or reflections on how your services have been operating, or good ideas in terms of safeguards, protection as you start to open, please continue to talk about that in the Q&A. I would like to move on and invite Linda to chair the next session, which is on the prevalence of violence and what has happened during the crisis. We have received numerous emails. We have seen statistics and reports and discussions led by the EU, Council of Europe, but also the UN, where we get a lot of indications on increases in certain forms of violence, decrease in reports to child protection and police, but increase, as you mentioned, in calls to helplines. And we just wanted to, without making any kind of again scientific research into this over a webinar, we just wanted to look at that. So I'll hand over to you, Linda, to look at the poll and comment on that.
The problem for me is that I can't see the answers. I can just see the questions in the poll.
I can end the polling, and then I will broadcast the results so then everyone can see.
Okay, great.
Do you see it now?
Yes.
Good.
So can everyone see it? No, it's just me. So
I think everyone can see.
Everyone can see. So What are the key trends you see in terms of prevalence of violence against children in your country? And 54% said increase in calls to helplines and similar. 0%, no one said decrease in calls to helplines. And it was also reported 31% reported increase in reporting to child protection services or police, and 46% decrease in reporting to child protection service or police, and 8% others. So it's important with the reporting to the police here that there is some reporting an increase, but also those reporting a decrease. So I don't know if anyone would like to comment, and maybe if someone could comment on, if we start from the top, increasing calls to helplines and similar. That's a bit what we heard from Ireland also. But is there someone else who wants to comment?
A great way to let us
Yeah.
know that you'd like to have a comment is to write a few words about what you'd like to say in this QA. So if you don't have it open yet, on the bottom bar, there's a QA button. When you open that, then you get to type your comments and questions, and then we'll follow there.
Okay, great. So maybe it's easier to just let anyone who wants to comment on these trends that you see. We would be very interesting to hear from your organization.
They don't all have rights to speak.
Oh, so I'm supposed to pick someone. You have to help me out here. Sorry, I don't understand the structure. So who do you want me to ask, Shona? Here is someone.
I don't see any hands up in the attendees list.
But here
And we have a new comment from Antti.
Yeah,
yes.
in Helsinki.
Antti, you will get promoted. Give me 2 seconds.
Great.
And now she's here. Welcome, Antti. When you've got your microphone and video ready, go on ahead.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, great.
Hello.
I'm not sure if you can see me. I'm supposed to have the video on as well, but okay, I think now you can see me.
Now we can see you.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
Well, I'm working here as a psychologist in the Helsinki area, and we have seen a pretty big decrease in reports, in both police reports and in child protection services. And we think this is probably due to closure of schools and preschools. And I think the statistics I've seen is that the decrease is around 30 to 50% in all of the reports, both child sexual abuse and violence. And also, let me check my notes. Well, also what I would like to say is that in general, like, our case management hasn't changed that much, but we have pretty much postponed all the non-urgent cases because police is also doing that, and that affects us like directly. But we are still conducting interviews here as usual, but mostly we are working out of office and just writing on the veracity assessments, but conducting less interviews. But now the schools are already opened yesterday. So I think that's gonna change change in the near future. And I think we are expecting to see a spike in reports. I'm not sure if it's going to happen this summer, but probably when the schools are opening up in the next fall. Yeah, I think that's the sort of consensus that we have here in Finland at the moment.
So when you talked about these figures about decrease, is that from your Barnahus or is that more national-wide figures?
Those are like from Helsinki area, those figures.
From the Helsinki area?
Yeah,
okay.
from our police districts.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So any questions more for Antti? Okay, let's see if we have any more questions than in the
We
Q&A.
do. We have one about forms of violence here.
Yeah. Okay, so that's
in the poll.
next.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the next. Yeah, please. So that question: what forms of violence are on the rise, and at this time in your country? And 62% have answered that their answers are more anecdotal rather than documented, and that's of course absolutely okay here. And there is a feeling that psychological violence is on the rise, 46%, physical violence 62%, witness domestic violence 69%. And sexual abuse 31%, trafficking and exploitation 8%, online sexual abuse 46%, grooming 8%, and violence with honor motives or general mutation, that's 0%. No one answered that. So anyone who wants to say something about this question, about the rise?
Just on our side, Linda, it's been quite interesting. The police here have been quite proactive about the issue of domestic violence, and some of the police that work with us in the Barnahus would have been pulled into checking in on families that have had a history of domestic violence.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see whether that has any impact on what's been identified, what's being reported, and so on. Obviously, we don't know yet. But it's just interesting that they've taken a proactive approach in that one area, you know. Yeah, so we'll have to see.
We'll have to see.
We also have Christine from Hope for Children Cyprus, who has been promoted to panelist, who wanted to say something.
Yes, hi from Cyprus again. I would like to stress the matter on reporting as such, because we know due to the hotlines that children are facing some sort of problems at home, but when it comes to reporting, it's very different, and as well as to the procedures. This is what I wanted to draw your attention at, because this is our need in Cyprus.
And can you explain more about this with the different procedures, you say?
Yes, for example, we have launched another hotline for children and families to be able to access psychologists and social workers. And we've established this since COVID became a reality in our lives. And even though we have mothers most of the time calling about domestic violence, which makes children witnesses of violence, they rarely go on to report.
Of course.
As well as the fact that, for example, in Cyprus, you cannot prove psychological violence if you cannot prove physical violence. I mean, at court. So most of the times the children's psychology or emotional repression is not taken into great consideration. Yeah. Who's the expert with nice eyes and mustache in front of your camera, Olivia?
Pikachu makes another appearance.
I know, but he has been removed. He couldn't join this particular webinar today.
Okay, so anyone else? We'll see here. There's so much to look here at on my screen, so I'm not sure who's been let
Well,
in.
I could maybe just highlight this experience that Albania submitted of that, for example, sexual abuse of girls from young boys using sensitive materials on the internet. They actually had 3 copycat cases where the boyfriends have recorded their girlfriends in sexual acts and have used these materials as blackmail. If you are also seeing, to our attendees, if you are also seeing similar things in your country, what you can do in the QAs, you can click the type answer button and share some more information there.
And I think that we really invite you to be part of this discussion, because I think it's really interesting to see that most of you have clicked the button that the answers are mostly anecdotal rather than documented. And that goes really back to the first comment that I made, that we hear a lot about this in different fora and we see a lot of trends, but what we have to do in going forward now is really to document what we see and to analyze the results so that we get a better understanding of the real facts and the specific vulnerabilities of children during these times of crisis that we find ourselves. For instance, what types of violence do increase? How does reporting or not reporting to services or to child helplines affect the image that we have, etc. So it'll be really interesting to hear more from you about this, and we will also come back to it in the survey that we will circulate after this meeting. So please continue to share in the Q&A. I see that Iceland, Olof has shared some information about how they have been working during the crisis. That's really interesting. But for now, I'd like to move on to Rebecca, who will focus on what's going on with the criminal investigations and judicial proceedings. Rebecca.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Shona, would it be okay to bring up the poll again, and maybe we can use that just as the starting point, the poll results?
Yeah, they should still be there. Maybe if you still see the poll button, yes, you can bring it back up.
Indeed, I have that. So,
right.
So just to look, this of course poll just simply begins to show us what is happening. We can see that obviously a lot of people, 54%, are talking about the delay in criminal investigation and judicial proceedings as a challenge. And then, of course, going more specifically into the investigations, 23% continued as usual, and 31% have continued online, and 46% say other. So we'll be keen to learn more in detail about this. And then again, 8% of judicial procedures have continued as usual, 31% completely interrupted, which is really quite high, and 23% have continued online. So thank you everybody for answering the poll, and we'll look forward in the survey to getting a bit more information. And may I invite people, if you have a question about the criminal investigation or the court proceedings that you'd like to learn more on, could you pop it into the chat or the questions so that we can pick it up for the survey that will follow up, and we'll see how many questions we can ask and how we can get to information that we all need or would like to understand from each other. And of course, already from what other interveners here have said, we can see, that chain of reporting is broken in many cases. And then, of course, into the investigations, we can hear that the investigations may be happening in a different way, because the interagency cooperation around the investigation is either interrupted or far less easy in this situation. It was interesting to hear from Sweden about the fact that in the interview room now you will no longer have, of course, all of the actors sitting in the back room. And maybe I could invite Emil Flam from Indigo, who work with the Swedish Barnahus on recording, to share a little bit about what they see in COVID times, or what they might anticipate. Emil, are you on the call? May I invite you to talk now?
Yes, hello. Thank you for inviting me. Well, this situation is of course also difficult for us, and what we've been tasked with to handle over the last couple of months actually is to ensure for some sort of business continuity, even for a police station or a children's safe house or a Barnahus. Most of them, they do say that to ensure for business continuity, we need to do our interviews over the phone or using some sort of video telephony technology similar to this Zoom call, and that is an unavoidable action to take, I must say, because it's quite difficult to ensure for the safeguarding of your employees when being in the same room as the children and as the parents, and it's also very different from country to country in what they allow you to do. So seeing Norway as an example, where I do live, it has been very difficult for the Barnahuses here in Norway to meet their witnesses and suspects or whatever role the interviewee may have. So the question then is what to do with the capturing of the evidence and ensuring a proper record of the interview. The most video telephony technologies, they do offer you a recording feature straight off from the standard software package. Now, this recording feature is very good at documenting what's happening, but it doesn't necessarily give you a proper record of what was said and done during the interview. On that regards, the fact sheet that we made and we published together with Promise last year is still very relevant. So the main objective for the recording is to ensure a very realistic representation of the parties in the interview, and that is possibly what is questioned the most when doing interviews over the phone or on video, as you might not get a realistic enough representation of the interviewee, because you can't really ensure for that interviewee is not pushed by parents or some other present in the kind of interviewing end or interviewees end, and that is difficult, but it doesn't really. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, it would be very interesting indeed to go back to the guidelines which were so helpfully put together, and to see kind of what the effects of the situation are on their application, and maybe that's something we could endeavour to do after this call. I'm realising we, of course, only have an hour for this call, and there are lots of different avenues to go down. But perhaps that could be a very concrete output, that we just look at those guidelines and see how they may be affected. I know we have to hand over to talk about multidisciplinarity. You think I could say that by now after 4 years in promise? But just may I thank Emil and endeavour to go back to that after the call, and just to share a few last thoughts, kind of prompted by some of the things that have already been said. I mean, one of the issues in dealing with backlogs perhaps is how whether people are already engaged in interagency planning about how to deal with backlogs. You know, because obviously we can anticipate both a spike and a backlog, and we should be maybe there are already protocols that people have in place, maybe discussions they've had in place, that it would be helpful to share. Coming from the comment from Albania, I suppose one of the questions also is, if there is an increase in peer-to-peer problems, how would that be addressed? I mean, again, in a time of pressure and backlog and building things up, it would be much better to have some very clear guidelines and orientations on how to deal with that in an appropriate way, but also a child-centered way for everyone involved. So lots to discuss and lots to share, and I'm hoping we'll find the opportunities to continue to share after the call. I should hand back to you, though, I think, Shauna, with an eye on the clock.
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca. And it is a bit frustrating to only have such short time for all of the topics. But as I said in the beginning, this is really only for us to identify some of the issues that we will have to come back and look more closely at. The things that you tell us now will serve as a basis for further webinars, discussions, and material. So please do continue to share. And I see one comment here from Finland about the delay, which of course it's related to the backlog. One of our standards in Promise is to prevent undue delay, and there are certainly concerns about how this additional delay that the crisis now may cause will affect children's stories, the way that we collect their evidence and their well-being in the longer term. So please continue to provide those useful comments. To end, we wanted to talk a little bit about multidisciplinarity, and it can be said if you do it slowly. And I'm glad I beat a native speaker to it. In any case, I'd like to hand over to Shauna now, who will look a little bit at the challenges and opportunities for teamwork, cohesion, and the productivity, which we've already touched upon a little bit.
Indeed, we have. Thanks so much, Olivia. And to our participants, I'm going to even start off right now saying that if you have some experiences to share here, please write something in the chat or raise your hand. I can see your raised hand in our list of attendees. By the way, we've gotten up to almost 50 attendees at some point during today. So I'm glad that we took the time to throw this meeting together in a very short time. Some questions that I have for all of you are, do you have any professions in your multidisciplinary team that are still resisting moving towards working online? Are there specific aspects of your work that do or don't work online? Maybe in your country, there are spots where there's not quite as much broadband internet, so it's an extra challenge in those areas. Are you having any special innovations or new tools that you think other people should know about? What are you doing to keep that we are a team feeling alive? And finally, are there things that you have started doing now that you'd like to continue doing in the future? We heard a little bit from Stockholm earlier today that their partner and multidisciplinary meetings are continuing, and that It's somehow been, even though they're not doing it in person anymore for the time being, that it's been a team building time, that everyone's been trying to help each other out. And that's quite nice to hear. Maybe others of you have similar experiences, that there are silver linings, and technology really can bring us together. We heard from Ireland that they we're starting to move from the forming stage of building their team, since it's still a new location, and that this working from home has actually pushed them back into the forming stage somehow, towards that direction. So interesting to hear about the impact of this on newer teams. We also heard from Ireland a little bit that there are some parts of working online that are some parts of how they're working now that they're looking forward to carrying forward, such as the working online and the mobile teams. That's very interesting. In the survey results, some interesting responses here about your status during the crisis. 54% of respondents have said that you're closed for visitors, but who have offered online or mobile services to clients. And here in the chat, Poland has said that they're organizing online therapy and legal consultations, and that only their psychiatrists have had face-to-face therapy. And about criminal investigations and judicial procedures, we already looked at those ones, 31 and 23%. And finally, the survey results about the challenges for your service. 62% of respondents said that they are concerned about multidisciplinary case management. Greetings from Spain. So we have a response here from Spain. Currently, customer service and coordination are online in our organization. Professionals come to the job time in shifts. This is interesting because Iceland is also doing this, the shift works. So one option seems to be when you do have to come in person, that you're working in different teams. So I guess this is to reduce the spread of disease, of course, that it's limited to one team if one team gets sick. I'm a bit tempted to invite Olof here, actually, if you're still on the call, to promote you, because I'm interested to hear how that's affecting your teamwork. Let's see. Olof, you are back with us. Yeah, now I can hear you. We'd like to hear, since you're working in person in two different teams, how is it, are you doing something still to make sure that you still have that team feeling?
Yeah, we had, you know, we started in the beginning of March, then we started to work in two teams, and the teams were working 1 week at home and 1 week in Barnahus. We never met each other to make it sure that it would not spread some COVID between teams. And then we had some Zoom meeting every morning at 9 o'clock, just to meet, to talk, just have a cup of coffee together to make this, how can I say, cheer us up, see if everyone is feeling okay, and so on. And then we started 4th of May. In a full, yes, we opened and everyone were staying here together. We tried to keep 2 meters distance between us, but we keep one forensic interviewer at home in case of everyone will get sick too, because it's very important to have these court hearings. But the judicial administration is now trying to make some changes in law, so every court can be in a Zoom meeting with us in the future. So everyone can be at the courtroom instead of coming to Barnahus, because the listening room is quite small. So they have been using the IT link from the Reykjanes court. But they are full because everyone is using it, and we have never seen so many cases from start of Barnahus since now this year.
Mm.
So I think it will be a future changes, but and we also have been using for therapy sessions Zoom, and that works very well. So we will continue to use that for especially for the countryside.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Rudolf. I've also promoted Anna Friberg from the Stockholm Barnahus, who in the chat has noted that they have some security issues regarding technology. Some of the partners are not allowed to work online. I'm wondering if you'd like to say a little bit more about that before we close today's meeting.
Sorry, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. I had to close my door. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I wrote that we had issues regarding the security, and that's even if we have taken some really good measures with inviting the participants in the multidisciplinary meeting that they can attend by Skype. Not all the partners are allowed to use Skype or Zoom or Teams, so they have to be here in place. That's sort of been a difficult issue to solve.
Do those rules come from those rules come from national law, or are they coming from like the policies of the organization?
From the organization or the authority.
Interesting. So then the only answer is to work in person then, or?
Yes.
Okay.
But of course, we have taken measures regarding physical distance and use larger rooms so we can keep distance and so on. But it would have been very good if they all could attend in Skype or Teams or something like that.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that important perspective. And of course, that reflects the very specific situation in Sweden, where we're not as locked down as other places in Europe. And with that, we're coming very close to the end of our hour, and I'd like to hand back to Olivia to wrap this meeting up.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you to all of you for your contributions. And we feel as frustrated as you that we can't discuss all of these issues in more detail today, but we are collecting all your comments and all your reflections and the conversations. And on the basis of that, we will continue this discussion with this very specific focus on Barnahus and the work that you do. So please stay connected with us and look out for our follow-up. We have also said that it will be possible for those who want to stay for longer discussions today. The room will be open until 2 o'clock. If there are people who want to stay to speak about specific issues, you can indicate that. And if necessary, we can also offer discussions in smaller groups. So either we say thank you and goodbye for today with the promise that you will hear from us, or you stick around and you tell us in the Q&A what you would be interested to discuss more today, and if there are any conversations that you would like to have with specific people who have been on this call today. So thank you and goodbye to those of you who leave, and welcome everyone who chooses to stay. And we will now take a moment to see if there are specific requests in the Q&A, and then we'll come back to you and see how we organize this further discussion.